Don't you just love that gateway arch? I mean, what a stunning symbol of optimism and of the pioneering spirit of America. It's indeed a gateway through which we create our future, and it is a shining upward surge taking us to new heights. Eero Saarinen, who designed this arch, also designed the wonderful Kleinhans Music Hall, home to the Buffalo Philharmonic. So Finland has given us not just great musicians, but also wonderful architects, both of the Saarinens. St. Louis also boasts, of course, the wonderful St. Louis Symphony, itself a testament to a spirit of optimism. Long in the forefront of the performance of American music, the symphony also pioneered our modern design of community engagement for large budget orchestras, a full 10 years before others caught on. And following the tough financial straits in 2005, the St. Louis Symphony has bounced back with all-time high records in revenue and in attendance. Most importantly, the quality of the musicians and the adventurousness of its music director, David Robertson, make the St. Louis Symphony among our most cherished orchestras. Across the river from the Gateway Arch lies East St. Louis. Its failing public school system was made famous by Jonathan Kozol's best-selling book, Savage Inequalities, a searing look into the inequity of support for the education of poor black children in America. Last year, the U.S. Department of Education released its Arts Education in Public Elementary and Secondary Schools report, covering the 10 years from 1999 to 2009. It reveals that arts education is largely inaccessible to poor children. The inequity is so great that Secretary of Education Arne Duncan declared it both an equity and a civil rights issue. This problem of access to the arts illustrates systemic flaws in our nation's education system, but it also paints a desolate picture of the future of orchestra audiences, musicians, volunteers, and administrators, for it predicts an ever smaller, more isolated and homogeneous pool of those who benefit from or care about our art form. So as we imagine the future of orchestras in 2023, there are reasons for both optimism and for pessimism. Our approach may depend on our answers to some key questions, such as how will we address the large-scale societal forces that impact us so profoundly? Or how will we leverage the voices of a new generation of music creators and interpreters who are leaving old boundaries behind? These are some of the questions you will have a chance to address in the next few days with the help of our speakers and your colleagues. But before we begin, I'd like to talk briefly about the last 12 months and where we are today. The image that represents our field for me is New York's Hudson River. I know this may sound odd, but the thing about the Hudson River, unlike the great Mississippi, is that the Hudson flows both north and south at the same time. Now, I know that sounds crazy, but it's really true. And to me, it's this pulling in opposite directions that seems like what's going on all across our field. We're deeply anchored in our traditions, yet simultaneously we're swept along by the currents of our new world. We have to hang on to our core audiences, but all signs suggest that the coming generations are pulling us towards something completely different. Or as a musician in the Detroit Symphony observed to me, I love playing in those new suburban venues and the work that we do with kids. But we also need to be in our terrific sounding concert hall where the orchestra sounds its best. How do we balance these two, he asked me. Indeed, navigating these cross currents is no easy task. To stay with this metaphor, we have some beacons, our bright lights, and we also have some turbulence. And for sure, we have witnessed more than our usual share of strikes and lockouts and bankruptcies. Each situation is, of course, unique, though. I would only observe that in these times of both rapid change and when traditional income streams are threatened, there is no margin for anything less than the highest quality of leadership from our boards, our managements, and from our musicians. And by high quality, I mean focused on a long-term vision while practicing open communication and dialogue and transparency. I mean empathy, the ability to put oneself in another's shoes on an ongoing basis, and being deeply engaged in building and sustaining trust. To encourage these qualities, the League will continue to make leadership development its top priority and largest resource commitment. And we'll also be turning increasingly to you to play your part in identifying emerging talent and leadership in your own organizations and creating pathways for its development. I would also note that while public perception cannot take precedence in navigating disputes, this discord takes a heavy toll on the reputation of our entire community of hundreds and hundreds of orchestras. I can tell you that the public conflict leads policymakers, funders, and the national media to make painful negative assumptions about our entire field, despite the fact that most of our members successfully rise to their challenges. These assumptions are very, very hard to dispel. But now let's turn to some beacons. And I want to start with our youth orchestras, our first point of connection to young people and instrumental performance. And at this time when the variety of musical options is unbelievably vast and the availability of passive digital engagement expands exponentially by the day, our youth orchestras have not only remained strong, but they've actually grown. Right here in St. Louis, the Youth Symphony has doubled in size in the last year. The San Diego Youth Symphony garnered the top prize in good governance from board-sourced the national group promoting governance excellence. And across the country, our youth orchestras have also been on the front lines of tackling the inequities of music education in our communities while developing so much of the talent that our adult orchestras depend on. By now, we all know hockey great Wayne Gretzky's secret for scoring so many goals. He said, as you remember, "I skate to where the puck will be." Well, orchestras have been doing a lot of skating to where the puck will be, and in our case, to where the audience will be. The New World Symphony is one of our great beacons for taking innovation to the next level. They've not only been testing new concert formats, but they've been adjusting as they go, getting audience input, evaluating the results, and collaborating with the orchestras of San Diego, Charlotte, Memphis, Detroit, and Kansas City to extend this work outward across the country. That's what I call real research and development. And how about that venerated Cleveland Orchestra, whose musicians started a series at the Happy Dog Bar, and that grew into a neighborhood residency, which in turn resulted in major local economic impact. I told this story to a national media representative. She practically fell out of her chair when she heard this about the Cleveland Orchestra. Our smaller budget orchestras have long held deep and authentic connections to their communities and have ensured that people outside of our metropolitan areas have access to symphonic music. And they, too, are reaching new heights. In Stockton, California, the orchestra stepped up to take on a civic crisis, rampant gang warfare. With a commission and composer residency through our Music Alive program, the orchestra brought young people, civic leaders, and the entire community together using a new composition about conflict resolution to engage the community in the very tough but necessary conversations. We still have a very long way to go in addressing the ever more pressing imperative to diversify our boards, staff, musicians, repertoire, and audiences. And by the way, I think one of the most important things we can all do is to tackle the threshold question of what we mean by diversity. A definition drawn too broadly risks diluting the unique circumstances of various groups and may be inadequate as a guide to any meaningful action. On the other hand, if we draw it too narrowly, and some not named might feel justifiably excluded. This is another very tough but important conversation to be having in our increasingly multicultural society. You could say we're still swimming upstream on this one, but again, let's not forget to acknowledge the progress being made. At this year's inaugural Sphinx Conference, orchestra representatives were the single largest group from among all of the performing arts in attendance. Showing up does matter. And meanwhile, a group of 14 people from 11 orchestras, facilitated by the League, has been meeting throughout the year to share best practices. And the League's online diversity resource center launched just this January. And wherever you are on this path, I encourage you to go visit the center on our website. And finally, I'm pleased to report one more very big bright spot for our community. And that is you have reversed the deficit trend line. In 2011, more than 2/3 of orchestras reported surpluses, while only 1/3 had reported surpluses back in 2009. And as we've been saying to you over the last few years, balancing the budget is just one element of being capitalized in a manner that's appropriate to your orchestra's own unique circumstance, your life cycle, your market, and your future plans. The 40 orchestras who worked with the League's capitalization diagnostic, the SMART tool, have had a chance to dig deeply into this work. I encourage all of you, and especially boards of directors, to stay focused on this much more complete set of financial indicators. So, what lies ahead for 2023? I've been thinking for a long time about what we heard at our Chicago conference a few years back from Alberto Ibargüen, who is the former publisher of the Miami Herald, formerly chair of the Florida Philharmonic, and for a number of years now president of the Knight Foundation. And Alberto explained how newspapers had failed to see or to acknowledge the rapid changes going on all around them, including the public's desire for participation, to own the news and to use it, and to act on the news, rather than merely passively hearing it or reading it. He described the insularity of their staffs, their lack of diverse voices, and the certainty with which they proclaimed, "We professionals know better." Noting the failure of the newspaper industry to face forward into the future, he cautioned orchestras to avoid his industry's mistake of conflating a delivery system with a core purpose. In other words, what he was saying was that the newspaper is the delivery system, and that supports the core purpose, which was engaging the public in high-quality journalism in service to a high-functioning democracy. So it's the core purpose that must be maintained, while the delivery system, the newspaper in this case, can change. Our organizational structure is indeed a delivery system primarily for giving concerts in the most perfect acoustic environments we can find. We've also attached ancillary structures for offering concerts and other activities to young people and others in our communities. And these parallel, yet separate, strands of orchestra activity create some interesting problems for us. I mean, think about this. If education and community engagement describe what we do for our communities and for learning, then what in the world would you call that other stuff we do? Those concerts of classical music in our concert halls. Are they not for our communities, for learning, for young people? Do we mean to suggest that our public value happens outside of the concert hall, and what happens inside is maybe a little more private? Or do we just have a harder time explaining the value of a traditional orchestra concert and making it accessible to more people? Or maybe the concert really is not what it's ultimately about. Using Ibargüen's newspaper analogy, newspapers are to journalism as concerts are to, and you can fill in the blank, and it's a very interesting exercise, and you don't have to believe that orchestras are passé like newspapers in order to play this. It's simply about separating that which is essential and core from that which is just habit. It's not for me to answer this question for any one orchestra or for all orchestras together, but I can tell you what I think I'm hearing from a lot of you. And it's this: our institutions, and that's our delivery system, could be organized to create and deliver a range of orchestral and related musical experiences designed for learning, for our communities, for stretching artistry and the art form. And our core purpose, instead of delivering concerts, might be to grow the humanity of the people we serve and engage through orchestral experiences of high quality. I like this framework because it places all that we do and may yet do under one single banner. It avoids the not very helpful bifurcation of access and excellence, or community engagement and the classical series. And it suggests that we bring the same high standards of excellence and creativity to our work outside the concert hall that we do inside, and that we infuse the concert experience with the same passion for learning, for meaning, and for relevance that we bring to our work in our neighborhoods and in our schools. And with this frame, our core purpose lives firmly in a public context. And this is critically important because as long as we remain tax-supported institutions, our core purpose must be and must be understood to be for the public good. And we can no longer simply assert this, we have to demonstrate it. And finally, if we anchor ourselves in serving people through music, we necessarily invite new voices, new questions, and new opportunities for fulfilling our creative and our public imperatives. This framework may or not suit you, and that's okay, as we anticipate 2023, a time that is certain to be very different than today. I think the main thing is that we be very, very clear about what is core and what is transitory, what we must keep and what we can let go of. This is important and hard work, and I'd like to close by sharing an insight into how we can do this work. And it comes from Yo-Yo Ma, who offered this up in his Nancy Hanks address at the Kennedy Center early this year. Yo-Yo talked about something called the edge effect. He said it's a term from ecology where two ecosystems meet, such as a forest and a savanna. And they come together, and it's that point of intersection where you get the end of the savanna and the beginning of the forest where you have the edge effect. And he says that the edge is where those of varied backgrounds come together, more diversity, less structure, and more possibility. The edge is where you find the greatest diversity of life as well as the greatest number of new life forms. I would submit that our orchestra's chances for success in 2023 will depend on how fully we can engage the possibilities that exist at the edge, not just for our art form, but for our whole society. Thank you very much.